I'll just say it this way. When we talk about a person being the property of another person, or we talk about a man raping a woman as a spoil of war, or we talk about the rights of a woman to be able to stand up and speak, or we talk about what people commonly would characterize as genocide in the Bible at the command of God, and we talk about these sorts of things, we have to understand that we've got to be extremely careful, whether you're a Christian or a non-Christian. I would say that even you don't want to misrepresent what the Christian worldview is, and when it comes to these passages. So I think that when we're talking about slavery, and we're talking about one person owning another person as property, we have to understand the context of what we're talking about. When people hear the word slavery today, you think chattel slavery, of the colonial, the American historical perspective on what chattel slavery was. That is not the slavery of the Bible. The slavery of the Bible was an economic system of what we would call indentured servitude. And it's no different today. It's seemingly no different today than you signing a contract to go work for someone in exchange for monetary value. Now, if you sign a contract to whatever it is that you do for a living, Randy, if you sign a contract that you're going to do something for somebody in this case, and in return, they're going to give you this in return, that is very similar. That would take a lot of time to break down and what it was like in the Bible. And there's so much that we would have to do to break that down and what the differences are, especially when it comes to the idea of one person owning another person as a possession. The Bible describes that possession as being their monies, and not being someone who had a right over them as like they would a piece of farm equipment, but the right over them that it's kind of a contractual basis, because there were punishments for how the master or the owner or the person who owns that contract was to treat that individual. Say that the owner or the master, the whatever you want to call them, gave that slave a black eye or knocked out a tooth. The same was to be required of the master, or he had to set him free. If he were to kill his slave, his life would be required for killing him. Now, you get into some of these, what we call case law situations in the Old Testament, and it takes a lot of time to decipher. When what I see a lot of the time is agnostics and atheists and skeptics. I'm not saying you in particular, because honestly, I don't think that you would do this. A lot of these people do drive-by, what I call drive-by shootings, when it comes to not literal drive-by shootings, but a drive-by like genocide, slavery references like this, that this is the Christian worldview, or this is the God of the Old Testament, and that is not the case whatsoever. And that's where I'm like, you know what, we got to look at these in a case-by-case basis. A lot of these situations were the judicial system of the nation of Israel. That would be what we would call in America the judicial system of our Constitution, with case law situations. Like, if this happens, here's how you handle it in this situation. This is what's right in this situation. This is what's wrong in the outcome of this situation. But when we're talking about that in respect to the origin of morality, that's totally different, man. It's totally different, and it would take time to break that down, which we don't have. But and I took too much time to answer that, but you've only asked 2 questions, so if you want to ask me one more, I'm totally open to that.
Yeah, I guess at some point we should get into that, because I purposely used my words carefully. Yeah. So I found contexts where God was instructing people to ravish the women, and that's translated to rape. It even talks about them telling him to sneak up behind women and take them for their wives. It also tells them to take the virgins and not the ones that have known a man. And then in Exodus 21, it talks about how you can beat your slave as long as they don't die within a day or 2. Now, I've heard like a slavery being back then, just like as if I were to go play for the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm under a contract, I can be traded, I can blah, blah.
Yeah.
That's... And with all due respect, that's not even close. Patrick Mahomes could walk off the field at any time and go home and never play football again. He could never talk to the owner again. He could never talk to Andy Reeves again. He can do whatever he wants. They also don't have the ability to beat him as long as he doesn't die within a day or 2. So it's not even close. And there was even different. It talked about that. was two sets of rules. So there was a separate set of rules for Jewish slaves and a separate set of rules for non-Jewish slaves. It's the more you dig into it, the worse it gets. But I mean, there should never be a point in history where owning a person as property, any context where that's allowable. And like I said, that the analogies that I've heard drawn to, like, that's just like a software developer or a football player. The football player has the ability to walk off the field, never play football again, and never be beaten, never be owned as property, never be let go after 7 years unless they marry a slave woman. Then they're the slave owner's property forever. It's like there's a lot more. I don't want to go off on a huge rabbit trail, but I purposely didn't. I don't do it to drive by, about the Amalekites and genocide, and it's so different than the Nazis. Like, I hate when people do that. That's ridiculous. But I picked my words very carefully with the slavery and the, you have with the inequality. Yeah, so like in 1845, Southern Baptist Convention split away from the church after Northern Baptists refused to allow slave owners to become missionaries. So, I mean, not only do you have an understanding of slavery, but you also have people even as recent as 1845, like, splitting away from that. And then you have, in 1967, the Supreme Court struck down bans on interracial marriage in Virginia. 16 states still had such laws. So, I mean, it's kind of like, I don't want to go all over the place, but it's a little, maybe we could talk about slavery at some point. We could have a discussion on that, or we could have a debate on that, because I've heard your side of it, and it's not satisfying the more you dig into it. But just to get